you want to get your first pet snake. But you want to make sure that it's a good snake that you can take care of and that it is the right snake for you. So today we will go over my top 5 snakes for beginners, and we'll talk about a couple of other things that I think are really important to mention. So I'd love it if you stuck around. This is Dorothy, my Tessera scaleless corn snake, and I'm Danielle with Danielle's Critters. So I put a lot of time and thought into what snakes actually make beginner pets because it's kind of a complicated question. There is a lot of information out there that will tell you that the top 2 are ball pythons and corn snakes. And we will talk about both of those today. However, they're not the only options out there, and they might not even be the best option for you. If you've ever watched Clint's Reptiles, he's always like the reptile pet for you or the pet for you. And the truth is, that's a huge component and probably the most important part. It is important to research and know what the care is of the animal. But if you don't want that snake, then you shouldn't get it, whether or not it's a beginner snake or not. And if the snake you really do want isn't a beginner snake, then you should get that one instead. You should just make sure that you've done all of your research and all of your homework and you know what you're getting into. So my top 5 is what I'm going to go through now. And number 5 on the list is a snake I don't actually own yet. So I'll be putting some pictures up here for you. This is the Kenyan Sand Boa. And a Kenyan Sand Boa stays small in size. I think the females max out at about 3 foot. They do need a high heat because they're a sand boa. And I don't actually know what that is because I've never kept one. But they're easy to handle and they're fun. They're very derpy. They make it really easy for people who are afraid of snakes because their little faces are just so silly. And they're very easy to handle. That small size makes it really convenient. They're slow moving. The females put a little bit of body on them. The males are going to stay a lot smaller. And the only other downside that I know of is the fact that they're fossorial. So that means that they dig into the soil and you don't see them. So a lot of times people will complain about keeping a sand box that they feed, and that's their snake. So that is a downside, but for the most part, they make an excellent choice for beginners, and they're ridiculously cute. Next up, in 4th place, according to me, and by my opinions, and only my opinions, is the Hogno snake. And this is specifically the Western Hogno snake, which has also been reclassified as the Plains Hogno snake. So you'll see it under both names, and both names are technical common names that work for the same snake. It does not include things like Easterns or Westerns or Mexicans or the tricolors that I've shown off here, because all of those have different requirements and are different species. There's even a giant hognose from Madagascar who's really cool, but not in the same category. So these guys are going to have an adorable face too. It's going to be very different than the derpy face of the Kenyan Sand Boa, though a lot of people do say that the Western hognose face is derpy. And you're also going to have a sexually dimorphic snake, where the male is going to be a lot smaller than the female. But both of these species, or both the male and the female, stay really small. So these are both adults, and you can see that the female is technically she's 3 times his weight, but she looks at least twice as big as he does, and therefore they need different sized enclosures. Now your cons on this snake is going to be the fact that they're also fossorial, so they'll also spend a lot of time buried. I do believe that they spend more time out and exploring, and they'll even do a little bit of climbing, whereas the sand boa doesn't ever do that. They're also rear fang venomous. This means that they have a very mild venom, and it's targeted towards frogs and toads, so it's not very effective on people. And they have a back tooth that is grooved, and if they chew on you, then they can get venom into you. And the worst I've heard is swelling, itching, and uncomfortable allergic type reaction. I could not find any cases where anybody had any serious reaction to the venom. And most people don't even go to the doctor for it. So that does exist. And in some places they are illegal. You have two reasons why they're illegal. Some places they're illegal because they're native to that area, which is the Western Plains area of the United States. And some places they're illegal because of the venom factor. And the laws just blanket all venomous snakes, and they fall into that category, and you can't own them there. Those are the two big downsides. The other factor that puts them so far down on the list is the fact that some of them sometimes do go on hunger strikes, and it is very stressful for a new keeper to have a snake on a hunger strike. We'll be talking about that a lot. I think he might be trying to breed with her. What are you guys doing? Anyway, we're going to put these guys back so that we are not reproducing here in my hands. In third place, according to my opinion, is the Rosie Boa. And it's actually this far down the list only because they're a lot harder to find. So the Rosie Boa is going to be one of only two North American species that are boas. There's the Rosie Boa and then the rubber boa. I think the Rosie Boa is prettier, but the rubber boa is even harder to find and is pretty cute. So it does have that going for it. But the Rosie Boa is going to eat for you really well. It is going to have a slower movement than a colubrid, which makes it easier to hold. And it does hold on, like you can see that she's holding on. And this is a full-grown female. The males do stay smaller, like the species that I talked about before that. Because they're a North American species, their heat and humidity requirements are fairly easy to have here in the United States, and they make an excellent beginner snake. I actually recorded this video yesterday, and it included a segment for each of my 5 recommendations. But then I don't know what happened. Number 2 is missing, and I fed all the snakes yesterday evening after I recorded videos. So my number 2 recommendation is the African house snake, and they're both very full from yesterday's meal. So I don't want to pull either of them out. I'll try to find some footage of one of the African house snakes to put up here for you guys. So African house snakes are very easy to take care of. They stay smaller. They hold on better than a lot of snakes. They are a quicker moving snake and have movements similar to some of the other colubrids like corn snakes. But they eat really well, and they make really, really fantastic beginner snakes. I don't have a full-grown one yet, but I'm really looking forward to having full-grown ones because they really are amazing animals. And the 2 that I have are albinos. They're actually albino Kenyan red African house snakes. There's a few different species, but all of them do really well in captivity and are beautiful. And you can get them in browns and blacks. Do really well in captivity and are beautiful. And you can get them in browns and blacks and different patterns. It's a lot of fun. My number 1 recommended snake for beginners is definitely the corn snake. And so the people who are kind of anti-corn snake would tell you that it moves too fast for a beginner, and they can move fairly quickly. So that is an element that does exist. They're also going to get fairly large. They're a skinny snake, so a 4-foot corn snake is not going to look as big as a 4-foot ball python, but it does exist. And the reason why I put this in number 1 is because they are fairly easy to handle. Even the squirmy ones, once they get any amount of size on them, they're going to be pretty easy to direct, pretty easy to just let slide through your fingers like Coral's doing here. And they're a fantastic temperament. They're always going to eat for you. I really, really hate feeding ball pythons because it can be really challenging to get them to eat, especially if you want to do frozen thawed. They're also going to eat mice their entire life. So they're cheaper to feed. When you get an adult who's eating once every 2 weeks and you're feeding them a mouse, it's going to be about a dollar and a half per feeding, depending on where you're getting your mouse. And that makes it really inexpensive to feed them their entire lives. And then they do need a larger enclosure. The minimum, absolute minimum, would be a 40-gallon breeder. And there are more and more people who are arguing that that's too small because they're a very active snake. So I follow the idea that it needs to be the width plus the length need to be longer than your snake. So if you have a 4 foot or even a 5 foot corn snake, then the 36 inches, well, the 36 inches by 18 inches of a breeder are of a 40-gallon breeder are going to be good enough. Um, but because it is an active snake, if you can, giving them a bigger space is going to be even better for them, and it's going to be cooler for you because you'll get to watch them do more in their enclosure. So a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot is an absolutely fantastic option for a corn snake. And it is a big commitment. And it is something you should think about before you purchase your snake. So if you want enclosure, all of the other 4 options on this list are much smaller options. And if a smaller enclosure works for you better than a larger enclosure, then that might be what you want to go with. Corn snakes are really amazing animals, but that is going to be the biggest snake that's on my top 5. And you'll notice that in my top 5, I did not put ball pythons. And that was actually very specific. So I am going to give an honorable mention to ball pythons. However, in my experience, there are a few things about them that make them one of the hardest beginner snakes that are recommended. And that is they have high humidity requirements. And it can be really, really challenging to dial in that humidity. You need the humidity to be over 60% all the time. And even when we lived in South Carolina, where our humidity naturally ran higher than most places, it was a challenge to keep a large enclosure at the right humidity. Now, once you get it dialed in, and if you do a thick layer of moisture retention substrate, and you have decorations that hold on to the moisture, it can totally be done and isn't a deal breaker, in my opinion. The other thing that can be a challenge is you need their cool side needs to be warmer than most people's homes. So you kind of need to heat, in most cases, both sides of the enclosure, especially as you get into the larger enclosures. They do need a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. Well, most of them will stay under 4 feet. They're this heavy bodied snake and they really do need the space to move around. And most people will tell you that they won't use the space. And you might believe it because you won't see them out and about. Oftentimes they hide during the day and they're active at night. Then the final factor that makes me put them as honorable mention rather than in my top 5 is the fact that they are a pain in the butt to feed. So all of your metrics have to be dialed in perfectly for all snakes to eat. Then there are times where they might go on a hunger strike anyway, and they might not eat anyway. And so that can be really frustrating, and especially for new keepers. We were warned by my husband's family, by members of my husband's family, that the ball python would cause our daughter serious harm when she first got her ball python. And he has yet to cause any harm whatsoever of the physical nature. But when she was brand new keeper and she was 11 years old, she cried when he didn't eat. And it was stressful for everybody involved. So it is completely frustrating. The hognoses can also do periods of time where they don't eat too. So it's not the only snake that I do think people can handle. It is just one of the biggest downsides. And when you couple that with the high humidity and the high heat and the huge enclosure that they have to have, then you've made it a lot more difficult than the other snakes on this list.